Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Imola for the final round of the Porsche Club America Sim Racing Series 13 Club Class in event number 7. As you can see, it is raining for the first time this season, and much like last night, it is going to dry up a little bit later on, and so the discussions around getting the dry tyres on after these wets that they're of course going to need initially is going to be raging for the second night in a row. It's myself, Ian O'Leary, and Ron Miles alongside me this time around. No Joe Peak to get confused with me about rain and wet and dry tyres. Ron, you can do it instead. Welcome along. Good to have you alongside me. A very, very challenging evening for all the drivers to come.
Yeah, very excited to be here in the commentary booth instead of being in one of these race cars out there on the track. This version of Imola, I mean, Imola is obviously a fantastic circuit known for its challenge. You throw rain in the forecast as well, it's going to turn this track into a slip and slide, but I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be a lot of fun in this race that we have to look forward to here this evening. The strategy content going to be huge. The racing action going to be pretty dang awesome as well. I'm really looking forward to tonight.
This broadcast, of course, brought to you by Princess Cruises, who we're thrilled to have as the 2025 PCA title sponsor. As the official cruise vacation partner of Series 13, they provide exclusive offers, including world-leading itineraries across a fleet of 16 elegant ships, sailing to more than 330 global destinations. Reach out to the PCA concierge team to book your next adventure today by calling 833-679-2188. This is also the 70th anniversary of the Porsche Club America. Great to be celebrating a landmark year with the 13th series of the Porsche Club America Sim Racing Series here. This is the conclusion of the club class here tonight, and we're very pleased to be along for it. It's been a long schedule throughout a number of different courses, from the high banks of Daytona at the very start of the season to the more Grand Prix circuits like the Algarve and Silverstone throughout the middle of the season, to some traditional North American circuits as well at Canadian Time, Motorsport Park and Road America. We've ended, Ron, with two very twisty Grand Prix circuits over in Europe.
Yeah, I will say, though, despite the fact they are rather tight and twisty, the Hungaroring and Imola have their unique twists and turns to them. The Hungaroring, a lot twistier than this. Imola, it's a track synonymous with speed, but it has been tempered down as of recent years. This track originally opened back in 1953. The current version we're running at today at 3.05 miles long, 19 turns in all, and you can see some of the most iconic corners in the world of motorsports around here. The Tamburello chicane, the Villeneuve chicane, Tosa, Acqua Minerale. That's one of my favorite corner sections to ever try and pronounce. Always find it a little bit funny to try and say that name on the air. Variante Alta and Ravazza. Some fantastic corner names, some fantastic corners around this track as well. And it's such a rewarding circuit to try and nail down, especially in these GT3s, and doubly so in conditions like this where it's extra tough.
Yeah, it certainly is. Let's have a look at the championship standings, and you'll see that, well, it won't be clear from this, but I'll tell you, Julian Velez is already, unofficially of course, but already mathematically our champion, even with Terence Tong's win at the Hungaroring, gaining 90 points on the day. He could not get close enough to overtake Velez, because that worst result still means he can only lose a maximum of 90 today. He's 130 ahead, 170 ahead going into the final round. The battle for second, though, is going to be a very interesting one. Terence Tong in second place is, going to be challenged by Ben Leung in third. Mark Foley, just 40 points further behind Michael McKinney, rounding out the top 5. Derek Dirksen, Dale Green, he's only 240 points behind, and he could make that up today. Even Dale Green in 7th place. Richard Woodruff doesn't have a chance. He's 340 behind, and so can't catch from there. Neither can Kenneth Eskridge or Mike Matson. But 2nd to 7th is all in play here tonight in the club class. In the Clean Driver Awards standings, we've got Ken Eskridge currently leading the way ahead of Julien Velez. Of course, one drop week included in this, but that means that anyone inside the top 4 can win from here. That includes Dale Green and Chris Sherburn. Then you get to those who are a little bit further back and have had incidents so far this season. Ben Leung rounding out the top 5, Terence Tong, etc. You generally see those who are good in the normal point standings getting up towards the front in the Clean Drivers standings as well. Of course, just to remind you, the overall Clean Drivers Award is still very much in play, and very much for Ken Eskridge as well, who after last night is going to really fancy his chances. The winner will receive a PCA Sim Racing Carhartt full swing Kreider jacket. Very nicely on the screen as well right now. I didn't realise we were going to get that, but there you go. There's the Clean Driver Award overall champions reward. And as I say, after last night, then Ken Eskridge is really going to fancy his chances. Only 1 incident point so far throughout the entire season is pretty remarkable, Ron, considering this is race number 7. Now, that doesn't include the drop week, and indeed that drop week for Eskridge would put the points up by a long way. However, in 5 of the other races, to have only got 1 incident point per out is quite remarkable.
Yeah, that is still absolutely incredible. The fact he's been able to keep it so clean all throughout this season. In the 6 races that have preceded this one, 1 incident point. That is absolutely astonishing. So credit where credit is due to him. Keeping it on the road. This is going to be the test of them all, though. I mean, we've talked about the challenge of this place. It's a circuit that has caught many people out, both in the sim and in real life over the years. And with these conditions, as we're riding on board with Robert Neville in the 087 car that was heading to Acqua Minerale, which I believe is essentially just mineral water in Italian. You can tell I only speak English, but it's basically a lake heading off through that section. Lots of standing water around here. So for Ken Eskridge, if he wants to hold on to that clean driver award, if he can hold on to that 1X at the end of this, that is going to be an absolutely incredible performance for him all season long.
Yeah, I was going to ask you later on whether you knew what Acqua Minerale meant in English, but yeah, very well done. It is.
I actually got it right. I'm surprised.
Yeah, it is mineral. I don't speak Italian either, by the way. I do just know that. It's a language I can't grasp. Out of the final corner for Robert Neville, and what's this lap time going to be? I would expect this to be, in his second lap, to be a bit quicker, to be honest, because his movements with the steering wheel have been a bit all over the place, to be honest. That didn't look particularly quick. This is Ben Leon, who's trying to overtake Julien Velez in the final moments of this session. And one more thing to bring up here before we really get into the times, and the final times are going to be coming up very soon for these guys. This is the last race of the whole series, actually, because next week they can't change the car setup. They'll be tinkering a little bit with dry versus wet setups. Now, we know that the rain is going to stop early on in the race, like it did last night, and of course we'll see when they get onto dries later, but we also know that the setup is so important. How many of these drivers have really tinkered this one towards wet weather driving? How many are looking at that dry period later on for, getting the maximum out of their car? Because you can't do both.
Yeah, you kind of find yourself stuck between a rock and a hard place in a situation like that. You set your car up to be good in the wet, then come time for the dry running a little bit later on, you're going to be dropping down like a rock right towards the end of it. But if you set your car up for dry and you only have about 15 minutes of dry running in this race we have coming up, you're not going to be smelling like a bed of roses either. It's always a nice little fine line that these drivers have to find themselves in. And it's also tough to try and figure out what sort of setup you can try and cook up, which is kind of a compromise, the best of both worlds situation. Maybe a bit high on the downforce, isn't too twitchy around a racetrack like this. It's a balancing act that all these drivers will have to try and reach. As someone who drove in karts for 10 years, I can tell you how important setups can be, doubly so in race cars like this, around a track like this, in a series as competitive as this one is. And touching back on the competitiveness, look at some of the lap times. I mean, it's now Mark Foley running in 4th. I was going to say David Snelling in the number 17 car, who are falling right now, currently qualified in 5th. He's about 1.035 of a second off of Julien Velez on the pole, so about a second off. You only have to go a couple of hundredths away to find Terrence Tong, and then from there only a couple more hundredths to find Richard Woodruff, and only a couple of tenths back from that to find Peter Crummer. So it's an insanely close field that we have in this series. So it may not seem like too much on paper, but a small little change in the suspension setups can probably make a huge difference in this race we have coming up.
203.1, that's a bit of an improvement, I think, from Snelling, isn't it? No, maybe not. He stays 5th in the session. No, that is personal best, sorry, but it is no improvement in terms of actual position there. Is anybody going to improve their position later on here? It doesn't look like it. All 21 drivers actually have gotten a lap time in, which is a good thing. And I can't help but notice that Ken Eskridge is right at the back in 21st position. I suspect with a wet race coming up last, it's going to be really important for him to keep the incidents down and win this Clean Driver Award. He's probably going to be hanging out around the back just trying to avoid any crashes here this afternoon.
Yeah, I feel like he may be what maybe in his best case scenario for this race coming up is just run around this track on the pit limiter. Then whenever the leaders come by, just come into the pits and let them all go by. That may be the strategy he has to employ. I certainly won't rule that out, him doing that.
Well, qualifying is now complete. Let's look a little bit ahead now because, well, the Porsche Club America Sim Racing Series 13 is coming to an end sadly next week, and the club class is indeed coming to its conclusion tonight. That does not mean that we have completed all the racing for the year in the Porsche Club of America. Have a look at this.
GT3 spinning into the westward chute.
That's right, we'll be back on May the 4th with the 6 Hours of Spa, a Operation Motorsport benefit event that will be involving, as we've seen in the team racing series, the 963 GTP car and also the GT3s that you see here as well. So anybody in this series will have been certainly versed in what the machinery we're going to be using there. For more information, visit PCASimRacing.com/Opmo8 6 hours, rather, as on your screen there. And to sign up immediately, you can visit the link on your screen there, tinyurl.com/Opmo2025. We'd love to see you there. It's coming up. It's exactly, I'm a date ahead, obviously, with you guys, but it's 1 month and 1 day away. So make sure you come and join us for that one. You don't have to be registered in the team racing series, by the way. If you may have catched that on RaceSpotTV over the course of the last few months, you don't have to be part of that. You can sign up. It's a standalone event. And we'd love to see you there on the 4th of May. Just less than 3 minutes rather, to go here in warm-up then. And normally I say that warm-up doesn't really matter very much. After the qualifying session, you're more likely to be cooling down and having a bit of a walk around your room. That's Brad Dalton's line, really likes to use a bit of a cooling down. But everybody else is out there on the circuit getting used to these conditions. And we're going to see here just how much even the pole sitter is used to the conditions here on. This is Julian Velez's pole lap on board, I believe. Yeah, it is indeed here in Draw's Turn of 1. And we'll just see here whether we can spot any periods and maybe corners where he could have gained even more time, because that was certainly the case last night for Kerry Brooks. Even the drivers at the very front have still left time on the table in these supremely difficult conditions.
In a qualifying session that's completely soaked with rain, it's not about putting together a perfect lap, because that's usually about as hard to find as a living T-Rex. No, it's just about putting together a good lap and a clean lap. At the end of it all, you can see Velez running very wide. That right there was heading off through Toza, the hairpin, right after the Villeneuve chicane. But again, it being wet weather conditions, sometimes running on the racing line is not where you want to be. Running on that stuff where usually it's full of a lot of marbles, but in the wet it has that abrasive asphalt that isn't as polished down as a racing line usually is. Can help you out a lot. You can see him running in many different odd points into the braking zones. I will raise heading down into the Tamburello chicane at the end of, at the start of this pole lap, I should say. You can see he got a little bit of a wiggle on heading through into the braking zone. One great thing about a lap in the rain, especially in a car like this, is having that confidence to not only get on that loud pedal and gas it out coming out of these corners, but also important to get on that brake pedal and try and get woed up heading into some of these turns as well.
And this being the primary one for that as well. This is a really difficult braking zone down at Ravazza, but getting it slowed in time is a real difficulty. So Christian Pies get hit by, I can't remember who hit him now, down at the corner there, but it was just a mistake on the brakes down there. And Chris Pies unfortunately ending up in the wall on the outside of Ravazza as a result. That was a good lap though from Velez. You know, it's impossible to get a perfect lap around this circuit in the wet weather conditions, but that was as close as he could get to it, and that has given him pole. He'll be alongside Ben Leung, about a quarter of a second off there, with John Gibson and Mark Foley on row 2, David Snelling and Terence Tong, who starts from 6th place. He's second in the championship and will need to move up from there. Richard Woodruff, 7th in this starting grid, ahead of Peter Cummett, with Derek Dirksen and Steve Cummett rounding out the top 10. Dirksen, one of our drivers, searching for second in the championship by the end of the day. Robert Lecroix is in 11th, ahead of Peter Sigourney, meanwhile, just over 1.7 seconds off pole. Michael McKinney and Mike Matson are next to the Mark Doran and Chris Sherburn on row 8. Rex Jerowala is down in 17th position, ahead of Nick Francis in 18th. Dale Green, Robert Neville and Kenneth Eskridge round out the 21 car field. Slightly less numbers here for the final round, but you do expect to see that towards the end of the season, and indeed in the wet weather conditions as well. But immediately, you'll notice it's a lot brighter. It is still raining, but it's going to stop fairly quickly. And, well, we are going to be, once again, looking at lap times almost uncontrollably in the race, because we'll be looking for that crossover point. At what stage can these drivers even think about putting on dries? Is it going to be like last night, where everybody, well, those that won anyway, those up the front, stayed on wets and it turned out to be the right call? Or are we going to see a quicker drying track here tonight?
And that is a real question that we're going to be asking on this broadcast, and these drivers are going to be asking out there on the racetrack. They have about a half a lap to get them warmed up, that being the tires. Track temperature currently at about 63 degrees Fahrenheit, which is not very hot if we are being completely honest. And filibustering here to get the conversion, that's 17.2 degrees Celsius. So that's not exactly toasty, and 65 Fahrenheit being the ambient temperature. This is going to be a rather tough start for these racers. A wet track and a cold track with some somewhat cold tires, heading down off into one of the heaviest braking zones in the entirety of the season. These cars essentially at terminal velocity by the time they head their way into that Tamburello chicane. So it's going to be a tough start for this race, but for these drivers, it's an hour-long race that lies in front of them, and so much stuff that's going to be riding on their minds. The prospect of this track drawing out, the drama that may befall them on this first lap. Again, as I said at the start of this show, and I will continue to say, very happy that I'm in the commentary booth instead of behind the wheel, because I do not envy the challenge that lies ahead for these racers.
Is that a sponsor writing there on the back of Julien Velez? He's certainly got some sort of writing going. It's almost like a whole advertisement there on the rear bumper. Well, not that they're going to be able to see it, particularly from there. In these conditions, the spray kicked up throughout the race, even in the drying conditions, is quite severe here in this sim. So we'll keep an eye on that and hope to avoid the issue that Chad Henson had through turn 1 last night. Slipped on the puddle on the inside of that first bend in the road to the left on the way towards the Tamburello chicane, and very nearly caused a catastrophe. Thankfully, we got away with it last night. Hopefully, we will tonight as well, as the final round of the PCA Club Class comes up towards its final hour. Green flag in hand. We're ready to go racing at Imola. We're holding for a long time. Velez waiting. And now the green flag waves and we're going. Here comes on the outside line Ben Leung, looking for that position immediately here as they go in towards turn 1 for the first time. Bit cleaner than last night. In towards the Tamburello chicane. Are they all going to get through here cleanly as they get on the brakes? Velez just about stops in time. In the background, there is a couple of drivers of the circuit. I think I saw Snelling slightly wide, but he got onto the circuit okay, and will continue on. Down in towards the second chicane. It's a clean start from just about everybody in the first chicane.
I think some drivers may have had a brief off-track excursion, but either way, a very calm, cool, and collected start for these racers. Still going side by side, though, don't get me wrong. Heading down into Toza, looking to see if anyone's going to try and get a move done a little bit farther in the mid-pack. Some drivers going side by side coming at it, though. That right there, I believe, is Richard Woodruff and Mark Foley side by side coming out of Toza. Foley not having a good exit at all. He's going to lose out on another spot. That to Terrence Fong in a 388 car. Terrence getting that move done to slip his way up into 6. Mark Foley getting chewed up and spat out by his competitors. Derek Dirksen may try and go for a move in the not too far off future.
Oh!
Attack being made.
Side-to-side contact, Peter Cummer into the side of Derek Dirksen, in towards Aqua Minerale, and somehow they get out the other side okay. Oh, and a big side of gain as well from Peter Cummer there, as he just tried to get on the power out of Aqua Minerale. That was all over the place here. In towards the chicane. They'll all be really careful through here because we saw plenty of spins last night at this chicane, and this time round, at least in the top 10 or so, they get away with it. Wow, side-to-side contact, it's not a place you want it at all down at Aqua Minerale. You're so on the edge on the cars anyway, even without contact with anybody else. Thankfully, we get away with it as we get towards the end of the opening lap.
Yeah, that section is usually terrifying in a GT3 car. You throw rain in the forecast and side-by-side racing and contact being made. I am really shocked that those racers were able to go through there without one of them ending up in the gravel trap around the outside of that section. As we follow Terrence Song in the 388 car, how far is that car in front of him? It's a rather significant gap. That's over a second between those two cars. The draft, the rooster tails coming off the back of that number 17 car of Snelling, they are just barely fully subsiding by the time they catch up to the front of Terrence Tong's race car. That shows you how wet it is out there on the racetrack still. iRacing marking the track as moderately wet as it stands currently, which is actually an improvement from what it was at the start of that formation lap. It was marked as very wet as they got this race well and truly underway. So a gradual amount of improvement in the first 3 minutes. Let's see how it shakes down in the next 57.
Yeah, a bit weird considering that it was moderate rain, supposedly. It was falling before. Although I suppose you wouldn't have very rain, would you? That wouldn't work. So I guess that's why. But yes, it's going to continue to dry like this, but the times are going to be the ones that are important. Obviously, don't have any realistic lap times here. And of course, we've got to mark our times next to the club class drivers, not the pro class drivers, who will, as expected, be going that little bit quicker than these guys tonight. That's Dirksen with a big slide as he got onto the curve on the outside for Aqua Minerale. These painted surfaces are not to be touched, and Dirksen very nearly felt the full effect of that there, as Piratella is the next to collect a victim. Is that no, it's Rex is it Rex Jerwala maybe? I think so. We will find out. The reason I'm pausing is because Ken Eskridge is a long way off the back of the field as well, but he started from pit lane, so that might be why he is all the way back there, as Derek Dirksen was seemingly a bit slow off of the chicane. Now onto the brakes of Rivatsa. He's okay, and he's still in 8th place.
And you brought up a very good moment you brought up a very good point a couple of moments ago. Had that backwards for a couple of moments there, but you brought up a good point talking about the painted surfaces around a racetrack like this. Brings me back to my karting days as we see the moment for Rex Jerwala in the number 7 car. That's a simple spin and wow, I think someone else joined him in an off-track excursion there. You can see a car very, very slow. That may have been Sherburne in the 155. Yes, it was going for a spin heading through that. A sympathy spin in response to the 7 stopped on the outside of that corner at the exact same point in time. But I was going to mention the paint surfaces around a racetrack like this and conditions like this. It reminds me of my karting days. There used to be a big metal plate that I used to have to drive across at one of the tracks we were running at. It was part of an old disused airfield up here in the Philadelphia area. And every single time we'd run in the rain, they would always say, don't turn heading through there, because if you do, it's basically going to act like a giant slip and slide. The painted sections of this racetrack are going to act very similar for these GT3 race cars. So they may be fast, they may be well-tuned race cars heading on the asphalt, but once they hit the painted sections, they're probably going to do a better impression of one of those Princess Cruises cruise ships.
Yeah, it's a real balancing act through Imola, I find, as well. A circuit that's already quite narrow. When you start to take away the painted surfaces, you're already sort of decreasing the track width by about 10% from based on what you would normally use. So it is a very, very difficult balancing act that you're walking a tightrope through here as you're going on through every lap. And Derek Dirksen right now is applying a lot of pressure to Mark Foley. Careful on that those inside curves too much. They will spin you around before you know anything about it. And it's even harder to catch at slow speed in these cars. So careful through the Variante Alto. He's got away with it. Now he can't see anything as he goes towards Raptor. This is Sigourney versus Leclerc. For 11th place, Robert Leclerc's going to be on the outside line here. And he's going to brake early, which is a good thing for everybody. Oh, Sigourney didn't know. That's exactly what happens when you go side by side in towards Rivatsa. Both of you ideally has got to brake early, otherwise you will be off into the gravel. That's what happened to Peter Sigourney, and he's down to 14th.
And that braking zone heading off into the Ravazza section, super tricky. You got the bend in the road, so it's super late to try and get the steering actually straightened up so you can finally get onto the brakes comfortably. And then along with that, you got downhill braking zone to contend with as well. Ravazza and the braking zone that leads into it tests just about every single quality of a race car and tests every single thing that a race car does not like to do. Braking while turning, check. Braking while going downhill, check. Doing it side by side, check. And doing it side by side in the rain with all of that, check, and checkmate.
This is super difficult out here right now. 53 minutes still to go. Best lap of the race so far, 58.1 from Julian Velez, but we did see time dip immediately last night as well, but then they didn't continue to dip as quickly as I was expecting. I mean, we dipped into the 56s almost immediately, but it wasn't until we started to get down to the 53s or so that the dry line started to, dry tyres rather, started to be viable. Through Acqua Minerale again here for Dirksen. Following Foley as closely as possible, and again, he's almost struggling not to hit him in some of these places. How is he going to work his way past? As I mentioned, the circuit not very wide anyway. When you're taking away such a proportion of the circuit with the painted surfaces, how on earth do you get through?
Prayer. I think that may be a good strategy for these drivers. Keeping your fingers crossed and sometimes even keeping your eyes closed and just hoping things go well. That's not going well at all for Ben Lung. He's lunged it off the circuit heading down into Ravazza. Off the circuit in dramatic fashion. He's now dropping outside the top 10 nearly.
10th place it is for Ben Leon. It's the most difficult braking zone on this circuit. He's been hit by John Gibson. Oh, that's a big hit down there at the bottom of the circuit. Don't be surprised to see John Gibson into the pit lane serving a penalty soon. That is an almighty whack into the Ravazza corner.
And I wonder if we can maybe take a look at another angle of that incident. This time maybe following Gibson. Just hear how quickly he was trying to bang through the gears and get it wound up, heading off into there. Here is carrying way too much speed as we saw that incident take place. I may have to look to see exactly how much of a pace disparity it was. But I think it was probably going about 30 or 40 miles an hour, way too quick off into that corner compared to Lung. Tough break for him as we take a look at that replay. Oh, he locked up the rears into the corner. That's what happened to him.
Sorry, just staying silent there so we could just, I was just listening in. Yeah, it was a sort of an initial snag of the brakes as well. These cars have ABS obviously, but it does not save you from everything, especially in the wet weather, as that's a big spin for Derek Dirksen, who's in the middle of the road here and he needs to get out of it, and he does. Oh wow, that would have been bad there, as the others went right round the outside to try and avoid. Steve Komacs was the first one on the scene who had to go around the outside, and he does get up into 8th place with Dirksen down to 14th. Let's have a replay of this one up over the top of the hill at Piotr. Exactly the same thing almost. The puddle is what seals the eventual spin, but actually the initial is just a snagging of the brakes. When you initially slam on the brake pedal, have you got it quite right? Well, the answer on those two occasions have been no. And these braking zones are so long that you have a crash quite a long time after you've made the mistake.
It is a delicate act having to hit the brake pedal in these race cars. The amount of finesse these drivers are going to have to try and input into their sim rigs, super tough to try and nail down, as John Gibson in that 911 car has made that call to come into the pit. Not only does he have some rather big damage on the front end of that race car, he's also been given a black flag from race control. So a penalty for Gibson. That's going to bring David Snelling up to 2nd in the number 17 machine. Richard Woodruff now moving up into a podium spot in the 934 car. Julian Velez now leading this race by about 5.5 seconds. A just penalty for sure, but getting back to the point that it was racing, the braking zones in a situation like this, in race cars like this, it's a very hard act to try and nail.
It is. And that is a shame for Gibson. He drops down to the back of the field. No malice involved in that incident at all, but just an honest mistake. In terms of out for 2nd in the championship, by the way, I said I'd keep you updated over the course of the day. Terrence Ton is going to be guaranteed that if he finishes in the top 6 today. and he is currently in 4th place, going well as far as that objective goes. This, meanwhile, is a battle for 11th place, 12th, excuse me, between Sigourney and Dirksen. Dirksen in the black and white, just in behind, trying to regain these places, and that's what most of the rest of the 3/4 of an hour is going to be for Derek Dirksen.
And we've still got a lot of this race left to go. Despite the drama we've had go on thus far, we aren't even 12 minutes into this 60-minute long race. It has had a lot of drama up to this point, and I gotta say, honestly, we're starting to see this track dry out rather quick. iRacing's still marking it as moderately wet, but compared to how it was a matter of about 12 minutes ago, there has been a significant upgrade in these track conditions. So these drivers maybe starting to get in their comfort zone seeing this track begin to dry.
It's very close actually between Mark Foley and Peter Kummerin towards Rivazza this time around. I suppose it is between all these guys. That's a bit late on the brakes from Sigourney, but we'll get away with it. Goodness me, what is the right point to brake at when you're going down the hill there? So tricky. Sigourney's actually got a decent run here on Mike Madsen onto the front straight, but he'll be too far behind in towards Tamburello. This race just not quite having settled down yet, really. Lots of battles still going on out on the circuit. We're not reaching a stage in the race like you do normally see in these races, where you're waiting for the pit stop phase, trying to save fuel before that point. It's still going on here. Sigourney there, trying to get past McKinney, excuse me, not Mike Madsen. Just weaving around all over the place. Half in an overtake attempt, half in a defensive shape to Derek Dirksen just in behind.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what we could call that strategy, but it was certainly something that we saw on screen a couple of moments ago. Still a lot of close battling going on all throughout this field, despite the hecticness we've had since the drop of the green flag from Steve Komatz running in 7th at the moment. Go all the way back to, we'll just say, Peter Signori, who we're following right now in the 222. That's only about 4 seconds between those racers, so it's a pretty close battle, a pretty close field that we've got all throughout it at the present moment. Despite these challenging conditions, they call the rain the great equalizer, and I think that is certainly the case rather early on into this race.
It looks like it. That's a bit wide from McKinney, but he'll get away with that. You can get decent traction if you just straighten yourself up for one of these exits, especially through one of the up-the-hill exits, of which there are quite a lot in this season. Through the chicane. Oh, that's a nicer line from Sigourney, much nicer compared to McKinney. And, well, we've seen what's happened in the past when two drivers have gone side by side through into towards Rivazza, so let's see what happens here. Who's going to back out? Do either of them back out here? They're both going to be late on the brakes here, and they're going to be worried about hitting Madsen. Oh, that was close. Mike Madsen would have been looking in his mirrors very nervously there, but Michael McKinney is overtaken. Sigourney got it stopped just in time, and he's up into 11th place.
Now some real close battling heading off through the final sector of this racetrack. There's still nose to tail heading on to the start-finish straightaway. Will we see a driver try and get a move done heading off into the Tamburello chicane? Usually a premier overtaking opportunity, but in the rain, that can be a terrifying moment for these racers. Doesn't mean they're not going to go for it. Side by side, heading down into the braking zone. Who's going to win out in all of this? Contact nearly being made between those racers. Holy cow.
And Dirksen hits the curb and spins himself through Tamburello. He just clipped the curb on the inside. He was trying to get traction down. He's only going to lose out to John Gibson, ironically, there. But that is costly again. It's McKinney who is trying to remake this overtake, and Sigourney who hangs on to 11th place.
And that is such an easy mistake to make in a race like this. And I gotta say, from my experience in these GT3 race cars, that sort of moment we saw a couple of moments ago can happen quite often. That's something I've experienced a lot. I like to call it a slow spin in a GT3 car, where you get in a sideways slide where no matter what you do, you can do anything with the throttle, anything with the brake, anything with the steering. Doesn't matter, you're going to end up either spinning, or the only way you don't fully spin out is because you're completely stopped. That sort of moment is so frustrating whenever it happens to me behind the wheel, and I'm sure pretty frustrating for that driver as well, as we nearly saw them come to blows heading down into Aqua Minerale.
Well, yeah, just 44 minutes to go in this race, and we'd like to remind you, of course, that we're thrilled to have Princess Cruises as the 2025 PCA title sponsor As the official cruise vacation partner of Series 13, they provide exclusive offers, including world-leading itineraries across a fleet of 16 elegant ships sailing to more than 330 global destinations. Reach out to the PCA concierge team to book your next adventure today by calling 833-679-2188. Well, we've had a very exciting first quarter of an hour here from Imola. Still lots more to come as the fastest laps continue to tumble in. 56.9 from Julien Velez already here. I'll suggest this circuit is maybe drying a little bit quicker than last night, but that last second or so for the dries to eventually come out was, it took a very long time to get here, let's put it that way. And we'll see whether it is the same here tonight. But so far, it is wet tyres all the way. And I imagine if these drivers would have seen last night's race, they're expecting to keep the wet tyres on throughout the remainder of the race.
I won't raise one thing talking about the ever going on evolution of this racetrack. We will reach a certain point in terms of the moisture level out there on the circuits where it gets a little bit dangerous. You know, you hear about some of these drivers who get maybe a little bit overconfident in terms of the conditions out there. The track's still a little bit too wet to kind of go for moves and dive bombs that you'd see in the dry, but just because it's a significant amount drier than it was at the drop of the green flag, these drivers feel confident enough to do it. I think we're kind of getting to that point slowly but surely where the track is still noticeably wet, but because there's been such an improvement since the drop of the green flag, these drivers' minds may get done in a little bit and they may think, hey, I've got the grip, I've got the opportunity to go for it, so they go for a dive heading down into turn number 1, let's just say, and then the next thing you know, they end up in San Marino because they overshot the section so bad.
Yeah, it's not as much of a jump as you'd think. to end up in another country around here. Meanwhile, down towards Ravazza, Mike Matson close to Leclerc. He's going to get a better run than that because Leclerc there was just on the painted surface on the outside line, which most of the time you do want to avoid. As it dries out, maybe it is going to be somewhere where these drivers do venture, but that time was really quite wide from the 718. He looks like he's got away with it though. Mike Matson is not going to be able to make a move into Tamburello. It feels finally maybe that after 20 minutes this race is just calming down a little bit, and with these drying track conditions getting slightly easier for these drivers as well. A few less mistakes creeping in after 20 minutes of racing.
You see, I commend your bravery there, Ewan, saying this race has calmed down. If I said something like that, it would probably be met in response with an asteroid coming down and ending up in one of the gravel traps around this racetrack. So I'm going to refrain from making any such comments. I will say, though, this field incredibly close despite all the drama that has gone thus far in the first third nearly of this race. We are rapidly approaching upon the conclusion of the first 20 of the 60-minute long race, and we're going to end that but with maybe a side-by-side fight going on here. Look at Mike Matson trying to get a move done on Robert LaCroix. That was nearly side-by-side racing, but not close enough. Now down into Aqua Minerale, and we were mentioning the drying up. Oh, look at that! He's going to have to take a spin and the detour on the infield of this track. Credit where credit's due to the Matson. He may lose out on a spot, but he did not lose out on any body parts on his race car.
If he gets away without losing a spot, then that's going to be outrageous. Through the chicane, as he cleared the slowdown, I can't believe that. That is absolutely fantastic from Mike Matson there to have the car control, to bring the car back over the grass and the gravel, to keep the exit speed up the hill and get away without a particularly heavy slowdown penalty. That is remarkable driving, and he's gotten away with it by the looks of it. Mike Matson retains the top 10.
I think if we went up to Mike Matson and gave him $1 million to try and recreate that, I don't think he would be able to do it. That was inches, literal inches. If he lost it a little bit before then, chances are he may have hit the inside wall. If he lost it a little bit later than that, it may have been turned into a glorified round of bowling heading down through the Aqua Minerale section. So Mike Matson definitely got away with one there in the number 6 machine, but just because he had that moment doesn't mean he's taking it easy. You can see him using a bit of the inside curb heading off through that Tamburello chicane. We mentioned the painted sections of this racetrack earlier on, one of those painted sections, of course, being the curbs around every single corner on this racetrack. We're starting to see those drivers get a bit more experimental and brave with hitting the curbs around here, which is a good sign that these drivers are hitting their stride comfort-wise.
39 minutes still to go here in this race, and they are just hitting their stride slightly, but those mistakes are going to be difficult to keep away for the whole of the race. Through Piratella they go, and Leclerc stays ahead of Mike Matson, who's suddenly on the charge, even despite his run in these last couple of moments. Through Acqua Minerale, he'll take it a little bit easier through here, you would imagine. He did lose a car length or so on the way in, and that's to be expected, really. Next time he comes through, out of the corner, and he'll look for his way past, but it's not going to be easy. Peter Sigourney's also looking for his way past. He's in the blue and yellow, as opposed to Matson in the all blue, just in 10th place. And Leclerc, you can see, whose fire is still burning despite the rain here this afternoon. Still got the fire coming out of his car. Here comes Matson in towards Ravazza. Another problem with the rain, of course, being that the line you have to take into Ravazza takes away one of the best overtaking opportunities on the lap, and that might be start to experience now by some of these drivers stuck behind Robert Leclerc.
Now, while Race 1 point talking about the overtaking opportunities that you see in a rain-affected race, it's basically just a complete shift. As much as a section like the Tamburello chicane that we're going to see these racers head down into in a couple of moments, usually the heavy braking zones, as much as they are great overtaking opportunities in the dry, in the rain, it's usually just a spot to have some sort of bad accident. And so you see these drivers tend to take it a bit easier there. But we're going to see drivers go for moves heading off into sections where in the dry you would have to be an absolute maniac to try and go for a move. Seen some drivers go for the overtakes heading off to the Acqua Minerale section, which I think I harp on it a lot talking about that section, but it's a pretty good basis in terms of how this race has gone thus far. Not only can you see this track actively drying out, you can see these drivers getting more comfortable with their race cars and the track conditions. You can also see these drivers go for some moves in a section where if you go for the dive there in the dry, people would probably suggest that you go on a grippy sock vacation.
Oh, there's Matson having another look towards Acqua Minerale. No chance there this time around. And he'll continue to probe. Lap times, by the way, haven't spoken about them for a while. They're still in the 57s or so. We've only seen 156, and that came from Julian Velez, who's leading this race by nearly 4 seconds. 3.5 seconds it is right now, ahead of David Snelling. So we are a long way away from wet or dry tyre running, rather. And we might well see some pit stops at halfway today. I'll explain in a moment as Mike Matson comes around the outside of Leclerc. That's a brave move in towards Ravazza. Leclerc late on the brakes here on the outside. Might well try and hang around there, but Matson was equally late on the brakes, and in fact Leclerc sent himself off the road almost there. Peter Sigourney comes through into the top 10. That's 2 places lost in one go.
Them dropping down like a rock in the span of just a couple of moments shows you how quickly your fortunes can change in a race like this. One small little mistake. Look at that. I don't have a good feeling about that. That car ran wide, hit the curb heading down that start-finish straightaway. I was fully expecting that we were going to have to read out a driver smacking that outside concrete barrier. Thankfully, though, for Robert Leclerc, he was able to get away with that in the 718 car without any further incidents. He should probably go out and buy a lottery ticket after that, because hitting that curb, you can see the spray get kicked up from that car as a result. He got away with one there.
He's getting out of the way now and dropping down to 14th place in the field. Yeah, just to explain what I was going on about a few minutes ago, I saw last night that some of the drivers actually, instead of taking on new dry tyres, actually took on a new set of wets, because the fronts especially were under pressure towards the end with the higher track temperature, of course, because it was drying, but also the lack of moisture to cool the tyres down, the wet tyres down. I do wonder whether someone at halfway, although there is a lot of traffic about, I suppose, which is the only downside, but someone at halfway might decide to change tyres, because it is the same fuel that you have to put in. That can be worked out, that's all fine. It's just about tyres here, really. We'll see, though, whether anybody does that. I wouldn't expect to see particularly early pit stops. Everybody keeping their eye out, of course, for any dry tyres that need to be put on later on. If the drying happens about 10 minutes earlier than it did last night, for example, then everyone will be on them towards the very end of this race as they check under 35 minutes to go. Derek Dirksen is looking a bit crumpled at the front end here, but his ambition certainly not. He is looking for a position here on John Gibson, who's also missing his entire front end, actually, after contact down into this corner earlier on.
Well, at least he won't have to worry about overheating. That's a certain. I will raise, though, talking about the ever-evolving track conditions in this race. The track temperature is continuing to shoot down. Now, 62 Fahrenheit. That, I believe, is 16 3/4 Celsius. That's not very hot at all in iRacing, currently marking the track as lightly wet. So, a continuing evolution from how it was right towards...
Oh, my word!
But someone just had a huge crash there.
John Gibson. John Gibson's hit the wall so hard there, and he's going to get hit by someone else's. Oh, he was trying to get out of the way, and Crow's coming at him in towards Tamburello. Oh, it's a terrible crash on the front straight for John Gibson, and Robert Leclerc has joined him as well at the very end of the episode. That is a disaster for both. John Gibson's already had a drive-through penalty, and he's had contact this afternoon as well. But that is the bit that's ended his season. He's just made side-to-side contact as he's coming down the straight with Derek Dirksen, and I don't really understand why they were running into each other. Leclerc couldn't decide where he was going, or indeed which way he should be going past Gibson, and he comes into the rear and hits him as well. This is how it happened from the air.
Oh, that I think is going to be taken a heavy look at from the race stewards. That was just a messy incident. Look at that. Trying to get out of the way, nowhere to go for the car right behind John Gibson, suffering one of the hardest crashes I've ever seen in my time doing iRacing broadcasts here at Imola. He hit the barrier in possibly the worst spot that you could have. It ricocheted him across the track. If he found himself in a bigger pack, that could have been an almighty impact from multiple cars involved. Let's take a look at this from Gibson's perspective, because this was huge.
There's not much he could have done. He hits the wall, and you can see him trying to get himself off the road here. I think Leclerc should have chosen the left-hand side, to be honest, to go past. But anyway, he will argue that Gibson was moving around unpredictably, I suspect. And we'll see how that's all viewed by race control, especially for Dirksen there. Is he going to be judged to have moved across to the right into the side of Gibson, which eventually caused that crash? These are some drivers not seen for a while. Richard Woodruff is at the head of a train for third place at a Terence Tongue. Mark Foley and Peter Cummer, actually, in the light blue. You can just see in the background. So a nice battle for third place, although these positions haven't changed since we were last watching them.
Yeah, that they have not. I'm still going to be keeping tabs to hear if we have any sort of penalties from race control in the not too far off future. I'm sure they're taking a look at that moment, hang down the start finish straight away. But for now, though, we got 3-car battle for the P3 spot. Woodruff, Tong, and Mark Foley covered by a tick over a second. I believe it would work out to be about 1.2 seconds between all of these racers. And you also see in the back a shot there, still within view, is a triple 3-car of Peter Cummer. So that's going to be another car that we may have to talk about being involved in this battle in the not too far off future. Usually when it comes to a dry race, you have a different perception about gaps. The 2 cars that we see on screen right now, Terence Tong in that Rexy-inspired 388 car, Mark Foley right behind the 316. That gap, that's close enough in the dry. In the rain, though, that's basically a matter of millimeters between those two.
Down the hill in towards Ravazza. Is anything going to be doing here between these 4? Doesn't look like it. They've all nailed the braking zone once again here. And by the way, lapping consistently in the high 57s or low 58s, although 56.5 that time from Velez. Maybe we are getting closer to dry running here tonight. We'll see if anybody is going to take that gamble, or whether they are going to learn the lessons from last night that it didn't work, and they're going to take that forward into tonight as well. With just half an hour to go, we will remind you, of course, that Princess Cruises are the 2025 PCA title sponsor. As the official cruise vacation partner of Series 13, they provide exclusive offers, including world-leading itineraries across a fleet of 16 elegant ships sailing to more than 330 global destinations. Reach out to the PCA concierge team to book your next adventure today by calling 833-679-2188. So, just less than half an hour remaining, and nobody's taking a halfway pit stop by the looks of things. Only Robert Leclerc has recently emerged from the pit lane, but that's because he's had a lot of damage to repair unfortunately, it doesn't look like we're going to be seeing John Gibson again this season, which is the same. Peter Zagarni has just driven through pit lane, as far as I'm aware. Are we aware of why that might have been?
I believe that may be a penalty for him, if my memory serves me correctly. Looking through, Sigourney was given a penalty in the 222 car. That, I believe, was for an incident with himself and the 718 car of Laverne Pro. And also to note, John Gibson, who has left the session, picked up a black flag for that incident we saw with himself heading down that start-finish straightaway not terribly long ago. Here's a moment that we saw that gave the 222 car a penalty, and there we go.
I'm hoping we didn't see that, because I don't remember it. Okay.
If it makes it feel any better, I can't even remember what I had for dinner tonight.
I think that's the first time we're seeing that, because we're watching these guys, so that's fine. We're not going mad. Peter Sigourney indeed getting a penalty for that one. You know, it just looked like he'd done a really tight line into the Villeneuve chicane there, actually, into the second part, and it went straight into the side of Leclerc, as you say. Maybe that explains why Leclerc was a bit further back than I was expecting. And unfortunately, it's the double whammy for Leclerc, isn't it? Both that incident there, but you could argue if he hadn't have had that incident itself with Sigourney, then he'd been ahead of John Gibson and he wouldn't have been involved in his crash.
Yeah, that's the sort of stuff that pops into your mind when it comes to a situation like that. You just think of the butterfly effect that can go down for you in a race, being like, if that didn't happen earlier on, I wouldn't have found myself in a spot for that to happen to me, and then it kind of does your mind in a little bit. But regardless of the series of events that transpire to get to that point, it still happened, and it doesn't matter where that anvil came from. If you have the dent in your head from it crashing down on you, that's what matters at the end of the day. As we continue to see these drivers battling, I want to note the continuing evolution of this racetrack. We're starting to see a dry line form at certain points of this track. The sun is peeking out through the sky. iRacing now marking the track as lightly wet, so clearly the drawing of this circuit has accelerated a bit.
Looks like it has to me. Yeah, I agree. Times are coming down. 56.6 from Steve Komatz is the pick of the bunch last lap. That's the fastest lap of his race. Not quite the race. Velez has gone quicker. This is in towards Variante Alta again, and Terence Tong is just allowing not allowing, but he's seeing a bit of a gap emerge in front of him now to Richard Woodruff. As I mentioned earlier, Tong only needs a top 6 to be confirmed as second in the championship this season, with Bedley behind him. He needs even less than that now as they go in towards Ravazza. Pressure's being put on him though, and he cannot afford to make a mistake. Mark Foley was extremely close in towards Ravazza that time round. Now out of the final corner onto the main straight. Foley slides his way through, and this is going to be close in towards Tamburello. He's got a decent run here, Mark Foley, former sport class driver, now permitted to tinker with the setups here in the club class on Thursday nights. Can he come through in towards Tamburello? Maybe with an inside line. There's a lot of puddles there. Got to be careful. And he doesn't go for it. You've got to be very wary offline about the puddles that are still very much there.
And if we see these drivers decide to make that swaparoo over to dry tires, we're going to see them avoid the wet weather part of this racetrack even more than they already are. Forget avoiding it like a snake. These drivers would be avoiding the wet parts of this track like the plague. That kind of rhymed for some reason. I'm not entirely sure if I should take credit for that or not, as we ride on board with Mark Foley in the 316 car, the Maverick region driver, currently running in 5th at the present moment. He's got Terrence Stone right in front. You can see that gap seesawing back and forth, going down, then going back up, then going back down, then going back up. These drivers currently locked steady in a very close battle to try and remain in the top 5. Got Peter Kummer, who we mentioned earlier on, may have gotten involved in this battle. He is still kind of within striking distance, albeit that gap has ballooned between the 333 car and the 316. Also, Richard Woodruff and all of this has pulled away. But I won't raise you this, Ewan. The gap that Julian Velez had at the front of this field has shrunk by about half. David Snelling is reeling him in.
He is. 7 tenths last lap. I'd imagine same again this lap. He's closing quickly. 3 seconds rather. The current gap. We'll check back in with those, of course, when the leading battle comes about, if it does at all, as we go through Ravazza now with these guys on board with Mark Foley. As you say, Woodruff getting further away from Tonk, and you can see the mirrors there. Off, actually. Is he Peter Kummer, or is that just the mirror? He might have gone a bit wide, actually, yeah. He's gone back to a second or so away. Not sure whether it was the angle that we were seeing from the mirror there at the top of the screen or not, but anyway, he is still 6th place. Mike Matson and Steve Komatz, meanwhile, are exchanging places for 8th, as again, there's a look from Foley. Meaningless in the end, no chance on the way through. Looks like Matson, though, is on his way past here, is he? Ahead of Steve Komatz, who was pretty quick a couple of laps ago, but not necessarily this latest time around. Indeed, Komatz is now behind Matson, in towards Villeneuve. Tonk being put under pressure. Very narrow line there, forced upon him by Mark Foley. Now in towards Tozer, there might be a chance at going through here. Inside line, he knows that now's the moment, Mark Foley. He's pushed Terence Tonk offline for the first time. It's not worked this time round, though. Tonk keeps 4th place.
And keeping calm, cool, and collected in all of that. In a situation like that, in a race like this as well, it is so important for these drivers to just try and not lose sight of everything in this race. You can lose out on one spot, you can lose out on 2. Just don't do your own head in, otherwise you're going to have a mistake that'll lead to you losing about 50. As we take a look, that's some bravery from Mike Matson running deep into the green paint, heading down that start-finish straightaway, some side-by-side racing action and contact being made nearly at terminal velocity, and credit where credit's due. Not sure who that was that Matson was side by side with. They barely even lifted out of all of that, even with that moment we saw not terribly long ago involving the driver who at one point was in this race and no longer is, of John Gibson. Despite seeing that not terribly long ago, they had contact nearly at top speed and they still did not lift.
Well, I'm not sure did those two actually see it themselves, because, well, it kind of feels to me, even if they did, it doesn't really matter to them. They're just going for it anyway, which is fair enough and exactly what we want to see. But goodness me, they were close to an accident there. And I'd imagine they'll be quite close towards turn 1 again here as they come out of the final corner. Matson and Komatz are way more willing to go at each other than these guys seemingly right now, who are fighting, I suppose, for a podium, but even so. Komatz and Matson are providing the entertainment just for now. 8th and 9th in the race currently. Now coming towards Tamarola, not too far behind these guys, and they will still be single file. A bit further down in the field, we are keeping a look here at Ken Eskridge, because not because he's in 16th place, but because he could be confirmed as the overall Clean Driver Champion tonight. Well, you might be wondering why, because we've still got 2 more races next week, and that is true. However, if he stays below 3 incident points for the season, then he will be champion tonight, and I'll just explain why. So no more races at the end of this one for the club class, and because the Clean Driver Award is based on incidents, effectively you can't get minus on a day, if you see what I mean. It is about keeping your score as low as possible. If his score's already lower than everybody else's at the end of tonight, then he will be champion. Next lowest is Alan Hales in the challenge class. He's got 3 incident points right now. That's 1 off-track picked up over the course of each 3 individual races, by the way. The maximum he's had in the 5 races that count is 1, so he's had a pretty remarkable season as well. But if Kenneth Scritch continues the way he's going, he'll be the Clean Driver Champion, and you can see that he's trying really hard to get it as well, because he's driving around all on his own in 16th place.
Yeah, he's going for a, well, it won't be a Sunday night cruise. It'd be a Thursday night cruise. See, it doesn't have the same ring to it, so I think we may have to figure out the best way. A safe driving cruise. There we go. That's the best way that we could say. But I will hold off on talking about any more cruise-related terminology as Mark Foley in the 316 cars come into the pits. I wonder if he's decided to switch to dries.
Oh, be brave, I think, to switch to dries at this stage based on what we saw last night, but I've applauded him for doing it if he does. I reckon more likely is an early stop here to try and get himself ahead of Terence Tongue, maybe for 4th position. It is going to be a pit stop we will just monitor on our own timing screens here. It's a battle for 3rd place in this race continues on. It goes to 13 seconds before he leaves pit lane, so he hasn't changed all 4, which suggests to me that he will have only maybe changed rear tyres, or maybe only fronts. 2 tyres only, but he'll be staying on the wets for the end of the race.
And I wonder how that call is going to age for him. Is it going to age like fine wine, or is it going to age like fine milk in the Nevada sun? Only time will tell to see how it goes for him in the final 20 minutes of this race. Now to 19 and a half. iRacing currently marking the track as lightly wet. Haven't even gone into them marking it as very lightly wet, let alone getting into mostly dry or anything of the sort. So I wonder if we will reach the point in this race where we will finally have a drier track. Certainly a lot drier than it was at the start, but it's not dry out there by any means. Rooster Tails still getting kicked off the back of these race cars. iRacing still marking the track temperature as about 62 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a tick under 17C, so not very good track conditions for these races. That's very slow coming out of the chicane. That right there, unless I am very much mistaken, was the number 55 of Nick Francis slow.
I'm not sure who it was. I'll take your word for that. It was certainly a lap cut. He was being put another lap down, or one lap down rather, by these drivers to make their way out of Ravazza now for another time of asking. Lap times are still not coming down with the quickness you'd expect. I mean, I'm not sure how much wet weather driving you've seen in our racing since it was introduced over a year ago now, but feels to me like these sessions have taken a particularly long time, as that it was indeed Nick Francis, and he actually got help in that spin there.
Yeah, a little bit of assistance coming out of the chicane. That's a simple matter of one driver getting a terrible exit, the other getting an absolutely fantastic one. Not the first time I have seen that sort of moment coming out of the chicane around here, but I know you're going to ask me about my thoughts on some of my previous experience covering rain races and how they feel a little bit longer in reference to the races feeling a bit longer, or...
No, well, the main reference I've got is the iRacing special events, which obviously take ages, and obviously you can take a real full drying period there. But I don't know, I've just been very surprised by the length of time it's taking. You know, me and Joe were batting a couple of ideas around last night at the end of the race off air as to just why it was taking so long as well, because I can't really get my head around it, to be honest, compared to the other stuff that I've seen since rain was introduced just over a year ago.
I think there may actually be some credence to that claim there, Ewan. I got my tongue wrapped around my teeth about 15 times as we see side-by-side racing heading down into the chicane. That right there is Steve Comat's getting that move done on Mike Matson. That's a job done to slip his way up into 7th. But as I was going to say before my tongue got wrapped around my teeth about 16 times, there is definitely a little bit of like psychological games that go on when it comes to a wet weather race in terms of both us as commentators and those drivers out there on the racetrack. Considering the incident, it feels like you have a 2-hour-long race and the drama of a 2-hour-long race packed into a 1-hour one, as a lot of drivers are saying that now is the time to pit. Julian Velez is coming to the pit. Terrence Tong is coming to pit lane as well. Mike Matson is coming to the pit as well, albeit he disappeared off of our screens there for a couple of moments. So I guess he had 88 miles an hour on pit entry.
The pit stops a lot more split apart tonight than they were last night, that's for sure, as Julian Velez makes his way out of pit lane. Nobody really up on the jacks here, keeping the same warm tyres seems to be the call. Based on what you saw last night, the dry tyres are not going to be of much use until the very final 5 minutes of the race, which is not much use to anybody here when you have to make the pit stops at more than 10 minutes from the finish. Terence Tung now comes out of the pit lane. He's in 10th place. He'll be hoping that these final 15 minutes are a road to 2nd place in the Club Series standings at the end of the season.
Yeah, I think he has a very good shot to do it. He just needs to hang on for the final 15 and a half minutes of this race. Lots of these drivers decide to throw in the towel. I can imagine some of these racers were holding out hope, waiting for them to just say, hey, you know what? I could put dry tires on. Let's do this. No drivers really seem to be doing it at the present moment, with only about 15 minutes on the clock. We haven't even gone out of the lightly wet stage in terms of iRacing describing the track conditions at the present moment. I think the track temperatures are just way too cold, and the field size, currently we have 19 cars out there on the circuit still running around, so that could be part of the reason why we have not seen that same track drying, as Michael McKinley has had some sort of moment. I wonder if that's him coming into the pits or whether he's had some moment in the 527 car.
Well, I can't see his car anywhere. he might have disconnected Michael McKinney. It's dropping down with no particular reason at all, just as he was going through Acre Minerale. His car's not off the road, so according to my time screen, he has disconnected from the race. Well, let's see then into the pit stop into pit lane rather for the final time for a lot of these drivers this season. What is going to go on here? Velez is surely going to retake the lead. Foley is still behind Tonk by a second and a half or so. Leung another 2.5 seconds behind. But what about the guys who have just come in, like Snelling, who should be second here by some distance? He does get out not that far behind Velez, to be honest. There he is. That's going to be a chase to watch at the very end of this race. Will Richard Woodruff get into third? Well, Chris Sherburn's going to get through first, but he hasn't stopped yet. Will he stay ahead of Peter Kummer, who's the one who's really coming up quickly right now? Terence Tong is going to get up into the position ahead of Woodruff. Then Kummer, who's up just behind Woodruff now. And Mark Foley, making the early stop, has actually lost places.
Yeah, we're getting to the stage of the race where things are really starting to get spicy. These drivers have their pit stops in their rear view mirror. They won't have to worry about that. Instead, it's just going to be a heads-up fight out there on the racetrack. This is that treacherous stage of the race, though. I mentioned earlier on, talking about the track conditions evolving to the point where these racers maybe feel a bit more confident than the track should allow these drivers to be. The track is a lot drier than it was since the drop of the green flag and is continuing to dry still. These drivers are starting to feel a bit more pressure in the final 13 minutes of this race. I just have a feeling this is maybe the most treacherous point of this event for these drivers.
It is certainly because of the drying circuit and the unideal tyres that these guys are actually going to be on towards the end. That's a big bit of contact with the curb there for Peter Kummer, and surely this is going to be Mark Foley's chance here. He's up to speed on these new tyres, don't forget. Well, not new tyres rather, but out of the pit lane, new fuel load. Tyres resetting back to the normal temperatures for Woodruff and Kummer, but doesn't look like Mark Foley's been able to capitalise on this time around as he's been getting up to speed. So he will stay in 7th place, having lost time throughout the pit stop cycle. Let's remind you one last time, of course, in the 2025 Club Series that we're thrilled to have once again Princess Cruises as the 2025 PCA title sponsor. As the official cruise vacation partner of Series 13, they provide exclusive offers, including world-leading itineraries across a fleet of 16 elegant ships, sailing to more than 330 global destinations. Reach out to the PCA concierge team to book your next adventure today by calling 833-679-2188. Well, what a grandstand finish we're going to have to the Club Series here this season. The Club Class here at Imola on RaceSpotTV. Just less than 3 seconds between Velez and Snelling at the front of the field. Chris Sherburn's still going on the same fuel load, which is a miracle in itself. He's third, ahead of Terence Tong. He's a couple of seconds ahead of Woodruff, and then you've got Peter Kummer versus Mark Foley. The battle we're following at the moment, a battle we might well be continuing to watch for most of the remainder of this race.
Yeah, we're going to be keeping tabs on a great many things in the final 11 minutes and some change of this 60-minute long race. We're going to be seeing Julian Velez try and seal the deal in this race. About 2.5 seconds is a gap between himself and David Snelling. Will he be able to withstand that challenge? I feel like it may not be fully game, set, match just because of my time being a blabbermouth into the microphone. The gap has seesawed back and forth. It was 2.5 seconds, dipped down to nearly only 2 even at balloon back at 2.8. So one thing to always raise about rain racing and rain racing commentary, we were kind of mentioning the point earlier on how these races usually feel like they go a little bit longer just because you have the same amount of drama in a race that's twice the length packed into a race that's only 1 hour long. You got that, and you also have the gaps that can just they can increase, decrease. They can do pretty much just about anything you can imagine in the span of even one singular sector around a racetrack like this.
Still 10 minutes to go for this all to fall apart, if it is going to, for any of these drivers. But they have seen that gap coming down so quickly because of that traffic that's just in behind him. But we'll see about that when Snelling comes through. Time last time around was a 56.1 from him, 55.9 from Snelling. We're getting right into the dry weather period now, and actually Dale Green has gone for it. He's in 13th place. Dale Green has gone for it. Unfortunately, his sector times are nowhere near it right now. It's probably still too early from him. We always respect someone trying something a little bit different, but once again, it looks like the dry tyres are not going to be worth it until the very final 2 or 3 laps of this race.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's going to work out too well for him, but hey, it will be a nice experiment to keep our eyes on in the final 10 minutes of this 60-minute long race. These drivers who are out there on the wet still sliding around like a bunch of declawed cats attempting to climb up an igloo. Steve Komatz, who we saw have a big sideways snap heading off into the Villeneuve chicane a couple of moments ago, certainly good proof of that.
Well, these conditions still difficult. In these, even in these dire moments now of this race and of this season, of course, as well. This is round 7 of 7 here in the club class at Imola. We may well be crowning a Clean Drivers Champion Award here tonight. We may, well, we certainly are crowning a club class champion, unofficially, of course, with Julian Velez already coming in today with an unassailable lead. He's finally going to complete the season, it looks like, with another victory. He's already won at Road America, but he would like another win to his tally. Much like the Pro Series, it's been a very sort of topsy-turvy season, if you like, as far as race winners goes. Andy Jenks won the first 2 races of the season, but hasn't returned since, unfortunately, in the club class. Ben Leung then won the first race. After that, Terence Tong has also won a race, as well as Julian Velez. And then last time out, Terence Tong getting back onto the top step again. But it's been the other races where Tong has unfortunately dropped points, as Chris Sherburn now finally comes into the pit lane from 3rd place. Here is Terence Tong. Just 50 points from Daytona. That was outside the top 20. Portimao outside the top 15 on that day as well, at just 140 points. That is not enough from the first 2 rounds, unfortunately. And even though he's had a very good end to the season, where he's not finished outside the top 5 in the last 5 rounds, he has given himself too much work to do to re-overtake Julian Velez.
Yeah, in a series like this, you have to be as close to flawless as you can possibly get. I mean, being flawless all the time, that's not realistic, but just minimizing those bad days and maximizing the good ones is super important in a series like this. With only 7 races, that's rather rare in the world of iRacing. Usually you see, probably on average for a league, a race season of about, I don't know, we'll say 8 to 9 races, maybe a full iRacing season, so like 12 on the occasional 13 race season at most. That may have been a slip and slide moment.
It was for Mike Matson. He goes around for a spin and Derek Turkson will overtake him. Matson will not lose his top 10, but again showing, even in these dying moments with the drying conditions, it is not any easier to keep your car on the road, and Mike Matson has dropped to position because of it.
Yeah, right as I was going to mention the slip and slide qualities of this racetrack. There we go. Around he goes. Does not go for a whole spin, but in the process of that's one of those spins where you basically have to slow down to a crawl to get that front end to cooperate with the rear end yet again. Have them be on speaking terms, which, especially in the rain, is a lot easier said than done, and certainly some of the incidents we've seen thus far in this race are going to prove that. I will say, though, credit where credit is due to the drivers up and down this grid, and I raise this right as Kenneth Eskridge is going down pit lane in the number 77 car. A very clean race here at Imola. A lot of these drivers were probably expecting this to be a bit more hectic than it has been, and outside a couple of high-profile incidents and some occasional one-off spins here and there, it has been a perfectly smooth 1 hour-long race up to this point. Granted, we still have 5.5 minutes left to go, but I'm still impressed.
Yeah, it's a long way to go even to get to this point in these 1 hour races in the Porsche Club America Sim Racing Series. This is Series 13 here in the club class. This is the 2nd division of racing, by the way. Next week we've got the final of the club, the sport and the challenge class still to come. Those are both fixed setup series, and so the added challenges and differences that come with there as well, and they'll have different weather conditions as well. So while we've had conditions here that have been drying through the races, they'll have completely different conditions that we'll talk about on Wednesday night and Thursday night next week for the sport and challenge class. We'll be live on RaceSpotTV from 9 p.m. Eastern, I think it is, and that goes for both nights next week for the championship finales there. Meanwhile, still races to be settled here Terence Tong has stolen third place and run away with it here, but can Peter Cummer get that fourth place here with Richard Woodruff just up in front of him? The Ravazza section is getting, well, not easier, but certainly more palatable for a bit of an overtake, and there's a bit of a look there from Cummer. He can't get through though. Woodruff protects the inside line and protects fourth place.
I would say in terms of how palatable it is to go for an overtake heading off into Ravazza, there has certainly been an evolution, but I would still say it's like going from gasoline to vodka. It's still not the most appetizing thing in the world to go for a move heading off into there, and considering that the track is still obviously wet with a lot of standing water around here, don't think that is going to change. We have finally broken into very light wet, according to how iRacing describes the track conditions at the present moment. Not going to get into the dry conditions though in the final 4 minutes, with even less than that now on the clock.
This is going to be at the final 3 laps of the season. 3 to go as they cross the line there. Richard Woodruff continues to hold these guys at bay. How much is that going to be possible through the lap traffic now as well, especially as Peter Cummer begins to get a little bit more aggressive. He had a little bit of a look at the inside at Tozer there. He was never going to get actually down the inside, but he just wanted to get into the mirrors there of Woodruff and get into his head. Now look towards Piratella. He will not do the same because this is an entirely different corner, but now with lap traffic in up ahead, this is getting even more difficult now for Woodruff to manage.
Yeah, it is getting to the point where for Woodruff, it's like balancing. It's like balancing on a high wire between 2 skyscrapers while also juggling chainsaws. It's getting tough for him in that 934 car. Finds himself in 4th at the present moment. Only has a couple of laps left to go to try and withstand the challenge, but there comes to a certain point where there's only so much you can do. As much as there are many things that he can modify setup-wise on iRacing for these Porsche GT3 cars, you cannot edit the width of the race car. You cannot make it as wide as the racetrack itself. So for Richard Woodruff, it is going to be a pressure cooker situation that he finds himself in for the final few laps of this race.
And Foley being there as well is going to add the added complication here for Peter Cummer, especially in towards Tamburello this time round. He had a better run out of Ravazza really than the 2 in front of him, but he isn't close enough by the looks of things. If you wanted to make moves here, you're going to have to do it pretty soon. This is not like what we saw 20 minutes ago where you could just wait it out. You've got to go for it now with 2 laps to go in the season. That was a bit wide from Woodruff there through the opening chicane. Cummer, will get a little bit closer. Foley gets a bit closer to him. Look at this in towards Villeneuve. He's again going to get in the mirrors by the looks of things, and not quite in towards Villeneuve. The pressure mounting. The final laps counting down on this season now.
We have certainly hit the LT sassy section of this race. Lick the stamp and send it is what these drivers may have to do between now and the checkered flag. We're getting to the end of this race, getting to the end of the season as well, and there's little time left to try and get some moves done. So if you find an opportunity, you may need to wait up a little bit and then just go for it. We may end up seeing that before one of these drivers between now and the checkered flag. We'll say, though, coming out of the corner a couple of moments ago, right before the shoot down into Aqua Minerale, saw Peter Cummer in the 333 car run a little bit wide heading out of that section, as much of these drivers are getting a lot more adventurous with those outside curbs. I am still expecting one of these drivers to realize that a painted section of racetrack that is still wet will act like a slip and slide more than anything else, but we got barely any time left to go in this race. The final flat out blast at the end of the season. Let's see how it's going to shake out for the battle still out there on the circuit.
It's the very end of the season, and indeed David Snelling is putting that pressure on to Julien Velez at the very end here as well. Lap times are not even dipping down to what they were last night, to be honest. Even now, the dry tyres are not the ones to be on. Last time round, Dale Green still much slower than the others on the wet tyres right now. Onto the straight they come. Tamburello for the final time. Could be your best chance here if you're Peter Cummer, especially with the run that he's got onto the front straight here. There may be a chance. He has a look in towards Tamburello, but no. Woodruff has to pull the car over in defence for the first time in ages, but it doesn't really matter. He still holds on to 4th place. Or does he? That was a little look from Cummer there, a bit cheeky towards the end of the Tamburello section. Here comes Bob Foley now. It's his momentum just coming on the up now. In towards Villeneuve. They all stay the same. Goodness me, that was close.
Yeah, that could have ended in an absolute disaster a couple of moments ago. I was thinking, no way. Oh, boy, that was near disaster. Heading off into Toza, these drivers are getting even more adventurous with the moves that they are attempting, or at least looking to attempt on each other. May see a move around the outside for Mark Foley. That's going to be intense.
He's in the puddles on the outside line there as well, but luckily for him, they've evaporated a little bit. Outside line for Piratella is going to be too wide from Foley. He's not going to get through there on Peter Kummer, and that might well be that for this battle now for fourth place, unless there is something else heading towards the final corner.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he's going to be able to get that job done. Julian Velez is on track for the win and the championship here this season, but that battle a little bit farther towards the back end of that top 10. Still going to be incredibly intense, hanging their way off through the chicane. No swapperoos there. Let's see how it works into Ravazza.
Foley's going to be just knocked backwards there as well, as into the final corners come the leaders. Julian Velez is going to win for a second time this season, and he's going to be unofficially crowned our Club Series champion with a win here at Imola as well. Over the line, Julian Velez wins in the rain by just over a second, or just under a second actually at the line, ahead of David Snelling. And the battle for fourth on the bottom of your screen, it will stay the same. Woodruff beats Kummer to the line. Foley's early pit call doesn't work in the end. It's a close run thing and a good battle as well, but Woodruff survives the pressure.
Yeah, and it was a brilliant race here at Imola to be able to crown the champion in the form of Julian Velez, a driver of the 33 car, going to win it at the end of all of this. And it was a close challenge towards the end for David Snelling. Credit where credit's due to the driver of the number 17 machine. The fact he was able to keep Julian Velez honest. He didn't allow him to drive away off into the distance and grab that championship. No, he kept him honest ever since the drop of the green flag, 9/10 of a second being the difference after an hour of racing action. As much as Velez is obviously going to be your winner and champion at the end of this season, Snelling, that was a rather impressive performance for the driver of the 17 car. Not a performance to scoff at.
Absolutely not. We'll go through all of that here in a few moments' time as we have a look at the race results for the final time this season. And it's Julian Velez who wins for the second time. It is 9/10 of a second at the line. Snelling really closing at the end, and we'll ask him about that in a few moments' time. Terence Tong seals second in the driver standings with a third place here tonight. Richard Woodruff holds off Peter Kummer and Mark Foley for that fourth place. Ben Leung was catching them towards the end, but that spin at Ravazza, it really cost him, even at the end. Steve Komatz and Derek Dirksen weren't that far away. Then a big gap back to Mike Matson, who still managed a top 10. Mark Durham finished in 11th with a big gap back to Chris Serban and Dale Green. The two dry tyre runners, even on the last lap, didn't get to the speed that they were doing before. So this race actually remaining even wetter than last night. One lap down was Rex Jerewala, who we saw them all pass just very late on there. Michael McKinney also finishing one lap down. Kenneth Eskridge was the one of only two drivers tonight to finish with no incident points, and so he should be crowned overall Clean Drivers Champion unofficially just for now as well. Robert Leclerc and Robert Neville also one lap down with them. Nick Francis 7 laps down, along with Peter Sigourney, who was 10 laps down, and earlier on John Gibson retired from the race about halfway through after his monstrous crash in towards turn 1. Well, only Terence Tong is waiting for us right now in the waiting room, so we'll have a chat with him. First of all, congratulations, Terence, on a good season and a podium place here for the final race as well. How are you feeling after, I'd imagine, a very difficult hour out there in the wet?
Yeah, it was a very stressful race because I had to worry about the big picture of the championship, so I didn't want to do anything crazy. I have to drive very conservatively.
How do you think the season's gone as a whole? Because it's 2 victories for you, but as I was just saying not so long, maybe the first 2 rounds where you look back at and think that's where this sort of season was decided for you almost.
Yeah, the first 2 races were very difficult, and I had some hardware issue with the computer. And then after I got a new computer, everything seemed to be working a little bit more smoothly, so it was less stressful after that.
Yeah, but still 2 wins for yourself, and as I say, second place. You did get that in the end, unofficially, of course. We've still got to do all the post-race stuff, but congratulations on that podium tonight, Terence, and second place overall. Congratulations, and thanks very much for coming to have a chat with us after the race.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much. That's Terence Tugg there in third place tonight. Let's work our way up the order tonight then, shall we? David Snelling in second place, just chasing down Julien Velez at the end. David, congratulations on second place. The gap at the line, exactly 9/10 of a second. Do you think there was anything else you could have done to maybe get closer to that race win today?
Yeah, I mean, you got to manage tires to this condition with the wet, so I wasn't trying to push too hard. Kind of dialed it up a little bit to see if I get close, and I could, but it would have been too risky to kind of push it too hard. And, Julian deserved the win, deserved the series win too, so I didn't want to get crazy and take myself out either.
How much was it down to trying to get the balance right here in commentary to sort of the managing tyres aspect and the tyres aspect throughout this race, a drying track, and also the setups as well that you guys have been able to utilise, and of course the pro drivers as well. How much were you in your specific car using the setup to go quicker at the end because of the setup, or because you'd saved your tyres for the dry period at the end? Which, or was it both, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, definitely wanted a compliant setup for the wet. It was pretty wet for quality and everything else. The start of the race wasn't as wet as might have thought, but still was very helpful to have a really compliant setup. And, again, you use the rears, change the rears. I think Chris Braun did that as his formula last night. So tried to be really nice to the fronts as much as I could. And that keeps you out of trouble, too.
Well, congratulations on not only staying out of trouble, but getting in second place tonight. And thanks for coming to chat to us as well.
Thanks so much.
Thanks very much, David Snelling. Second place here at Imola tonight. Julien Velez, though, is our race winner and indeed champion in waiting as well. Julien, congratulations on that second win of the season and second win in 3 races now. But how much were you nervous there that you might lose it on the very last lap?
Yeah, towards the end, I started relaxing. I didn't want to push it off track and lose it right there at the end. So I started relaxing a bit. And he started chipping away at me and definitely got me sweating a little bit towards the end there.
How do you feel at the end of this season? Of course, you're going to be pleased to have won the Drivers' Championship here in the Club Series, but 2 race wins to your name in the last 3 races. Feels like you've ended the season on an even more of a high, if that's if such a thing is possible.
Yeah, I came into the season just trying to go back to basics and just, hit my mark, stay consistent, stay clean, most of all. And it really paid off. In the beginning of the season, I had some, I think, 5th or 7th starts, and, I chipped my way up and got up into podiums, and just that consistency. I had a season where I didn't really get to put in a lot of practice like I would have, but I think that actually helped, instead of over practicing and just concentrating on what I need to do and hitting my marks and racing my race more than anything.
Well, not finishing outside the top 5 all season, I'd say, is a pretty good return. Congratulations on the season and indeed tonight's race win. Julien, thanks for coming to chat to us as well.
Thank you, guys, and thank you, PCA. Thank you, Princess Cruises, and thanks to all my family and friends that have watched and supported me through all this. Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks very much. That's Julien Velez, the race winner tonight from Imola here in the club class. And overall, unofficially, of course, before all the post-race stuff is yet to happen, but unofficially, Ken Eskridge is going to be a Clean Drivers overall champion for the season. Congratulations, Ken, on that. I mean, you started down at the back end of the field. I don't believe you set a lap in qualifying at all. How much was that with the Clean Driver Award in mind, just making sure you'd stay at the back out of trouble, or how much was that a race decision for yourself?
No, that was I was really nervous before this race, and I'm not good in the rain, and I was struggling all week in practice in the rain. So I hit the wrong buttons trying to turn my wipers on and ended up exiting off of the grid.
I genuinely thought you just wanted to start at the back to be safe, but fair enough. I mean, in the end, actually, your strategy did allow you to maybe gain places in a more smooth way than maybe some others were. Of course, some retired from the race by the end. How did you find the hour, considering that I guess you weren't looking forward to it, since it's not a condition you particularly enjoy? How did you find it getting through in the end as one of the 2 drivers with no incident points?
Well, it was I was out in the open, so that worked out pretty good for me, especially since I was, struggling on this track. But Julian was in front, so he had just about the same advantage I did as running by myself. So I guess it worked out in the end.
Absolutely. And unofficially, of course, it's worked out with yourself winning the overall Clean Driver Award for the Porsche Club America Sim Racing Series in Series 13. Congratulations on that, Ken, and a great season as well. And we look forward to speaking to you again soon.
All right, thanks for that. Yeah, I've been my focus is not to hit anybody else or causing anybody else trouble. So I've been pretty close to clean driver about every season.
Yes.
So thanks a lot.
I've noticed. It's worked out for you in the race as well. Thanks again, and yeah, we'll see you soon. That's Ken Eskridge in the Clean Driver Award winning position at the end of our club class race here in Series 13, Ron. But it's Julien Velez who's taken the victory, toning it back towards the end, allowing David Stang to get a little bit closer. But I think he will have been feeling the pressure a little bit towards the end there of a great season for himself and a championship season as well.
An absolutely brilliant season from start to finish for Julien Velez. He's going to walk away from this season with that championship crown and a lot of high hopes heading into the next season here for the Club Series. Fantastic season from him, and congratulations to him for the championship.
Absolutely. We'll be back next week with the Sport and Challenge class conclusions in the Porsche Club America Sim Racing Series 13 here on RaceSpotTV. I've been Neil O'Leary alongside Ron Mounds, and Hugo Lopez has been behind the cameras tonight. Until we see you next week for more instalments of Rain at Imola, it's goodbye for now.